Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mystery Red Reads. I got to tell you guys, I get nervous right before I start. I don't know why, but like right before, and I'm the one doing the beta read and the crit, but I get nervous. I get nervous for my author, and I am nervous for myself that I'm going to bore you guys or take too long to speak or leave too long of a gap between my thoughts. And so I'm not an editor. So whatever we do, it is what it is as we experience it. So whatever happens, happens, and we're rolling with it. I refuse to edit these things. So part of that is that I want to present the author with a firsthand account of the first time I read and experience a story, because I think that's a really valuable resource, and that's kind of what I'm trying to give you guys. So today we're doing a beta read in Concrit by request for MarionAveoneLuther for the Avengers fandom, and this is a one-shot, and it is complete. Let's see, we have 2,156 words. She has 2,151 hits and 169 kudos. And we are looking for at the Avengers here. Category general, no archive warnings. We should be good to dive right in here. Let's see. I owe you 3,000. Summary: Morgan hacks into one of her dad's suits and takes a joyride in space with a friend. Tony ain't happy. Big brother Peter comes to the rescue. I'm excited. All right, let's dive in. The urgent, repetitive banging made Peter hasten to the door. Drawing in a deep breath, he unlocked his apartment's door and held it open. I think this can actually be apartment door. So we could go with apartment door. You didn't ask who I was, Tony remarked disapprovingly, stepping inside. I'm 32 years old, Peter reminded the man in a deadpan tone. 32-year-olds get assaulted too, you know. Peter scoffed and his eyes enlarged with incredulity. I'm Spider-Man. That's funny. Okay, so we're going to pause for just a second. I'm going to make an observation. And I think I've mentioned these once before in a prior video. So disapprovingly is an ly word, which it's probably not all words, but generally speaking, our ly words are adverbs, and we don't always need them, and they don't always help add anything to what we're trying to say. And so sometimes if we take them out, when we read our sentence, it reads cleaner, kind of like nice, tight, and neat when we take them out. So if we're being critical, which is my job, let's see. You didn't ask who I was, Tony remarked, stepping inside. So if I read it out loud and it reads smoother without the word, then I would suggest removing it. So we're going to pretend it that way and just see. And that's a matter of personal preference. Typically, I've given you my criteria for taking out adverbs and going for a nice clean read. So let's try this again. Let's see. I think the urgent repetitive banging made Peter hasten to the door. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We can go with it. We're gonna leave it for now. Drawing in a deep breath, he unlocked his apartment door and held it open. You didn't ask who I was, Tony remarked, stepping inside. I'm 32 years old, Peter reminded the man in a deadpan tone. Okay, whenever I use deadpan, we don't always have to describe tone and voice if our word speaks for itself. So you could probably drop tone and just say, Peter reminded the man, maybe comma, deadpan, period. 32-year-olds get assaulted too, you know. Peter scoffed and his eyes enlarged with incredulity. I'm Spider-Man. I think this can be a period, but I am not a comma goddess. We are not that. So my suggestion is a period. We're going to roll on. I could be a power villain, Tony countered, raising an eyebrow and removing his sunglasses, shoving them in his jacket's front pocket. Okay, I love this. I like the movements here. I like his movements, very classic Tony. I like it. I could be a power villain, Tony countered, raising an eyebrow and removing his sunglasses. I might have ended that right there. And if he has more dialogue, I could save this because it's classic. But at the same time, it's fine. It's good. I love that he's in motion. I know it's a classic trait of the character. Very slick, very suave, very Tony. All right, we're going to move on. You tried to open with your own keys. I heard. I knew it was you, Peter protested. Tony was clearly not in a good mood. Let's see. Tony is always sarcastic, though. So let's see. You tried to open with your own keys. Here, I'm going to give you one little tip right here. See the exclamation points right there? We're using 3 of them in a row. I was taught, and it proves true, to be stingy with your exclamation points and to use them when you really need to put emphasis on something. I would say, you tried to open with your own keys, period. I heard, period. I knew it was you, if exclamation point. Or vice versa. You tried to open with your own keys, exclamation point. I heard. I knew it was you. And so you're not shouting those. So I kind of think of exclamations as shouting. So think of your tone of voice and which punctuation you use with it. Those are just suggestions. You shouldn't leave your keys behind in your door. You know what? What if it was an emergency and I couldn't get inside? Again, I might even put a question mark there because he's saying, you know what? Or you know that. Okay, it says you know that. My bad. You shouldn't leave your keys behind your door. You know that, period. Either way, it's a period here. What if it was an emergency and I couldn't get inside? Tony demanded next in a scolding tone. Okay, this is what I would say. Tony scolded. That's what I would do there. Tony scolded. You'd blow up the darn... Peter shook his head in resignation. Trying to reason with Tony when he was in a grumpy dad mode was simply pointless. You're impossible. That's why I keep the keys behind the door. 'Cause you're an overbearing old man with zero respect to other people's boundaries, and you'd barge in here without even bothering to knock first, period. Or exclamation. But you have 3 exclamations, so I would reread the sentence to yourself and think about where you want to put emphasis and just give it 1. The reason we don't want to overuse them is because Peter's going to have different tones in his voice as he's speaking to Tony. He might shout the last line. Sometimes when we talk, we start out talking calm, and as our anger or frustration grows, then we start shouting. But he's probably not just shouting the entire time. Again, it's a personal opinion, just a little suggestion. I would swap some of those out for periods, and I might even do period, and then exclamation, letting it build, letting his exasperation build. Where is she? Tony asked impatiently, arms crossing in front of his chest. Peter's eyes narrowed in confusion, and he tilted his head to the side. She left. She left? You let her leave? Tony boomed. There, okay. So Tony boomed implies that he's shouting. Now's the time. I might throw in an exclamation point. You let her leave? See there how it would read differently? So I read it as a question, but if you want him to shout, now's the time to use your exclamation point. All right, let's try it again. She left. You let her leave? Tony boomed, taking a step towards Peter, who remained standing in the middle of his small apartment, looking baffled. Let me think here. I don't know yet if Peter is really confused or baffled. It's Tony. There's a chance that Peter knows full well what Tony's upset about. If that's the case, we need to be using different words. Is Peter pretending? Is he playing coy? Or is he truly stopped? As it reads, he's for real confused. So we're going to continue with that. She left. You let her leave, Tony boomed, taking a step towards Peter, who remained standing in the middle of his small apartment. Okay, it's a little bit wordy. I might go, Tony boomed, taking a step towards Peter, period. Let's see. How can we say without being redundant? Or you could say, comma, who stood in the middle of his small apartment looking baffled. Here's what I might do. You've got some action going on here. This is not like fight scene action, but it is intense dialogue. So when I'm using intense dialogue, it's a tense situation. So I tend to treat it a little bit like a fight scene, and I use shorter, tighter sentences because you don't want to lose your intensity. So now when you're writing action, when you're writing intense scenes, you don't want to be descriptive during this time. Okay. So, and I'm going to show you what I mean. She left. You let her leave? Tony boomed, taking a step towards Peter, who stood in the middle of his apartment looking baffled. See how I omitted some words there? I combined remained standing and made it stood in the middle of his, and I omitted small. We don't need that detail right this minute. We're going for an intense situation. We don't need details of our surroundings right here in this sentence. So we're going to just drop that adjective, okay, for this purpose, for short, intense scenes or action scenes. The sentences are short and they're very basically you've got your noun, your verb, and there are a lot of nouns and verbs in these intense scenes. It's not the place for adjectives. More when our characters are thinking and they're kind of like, I don't know, they could be sitting in a beautiful place and they're looking around them and they're taking in the scene and they're contemplating something. That's where those really nice dreamy words come into helping you set a tone. And that's where you would more or less use more of your adjectives there. So let's keep going. Well, yeah, Tony, keeping people somewhere against their will is kind of frowned upon, you know? I like this. I do like your dialogue a lot. I'm liking this exchange. I like it. Let's see. Where did she go? Home, Peter offered in an even more perplexed tone. Home, I'm going to just, the little swear words are okay with me. I'm just not going to say them out loud. We're just going to keep going. Home, my bleep. Pepper would have called me if she had gone home, Tony said, pointing an accusing finger at him. Let me think about this a second. I would say this. Tony accused. I would just say that. Tony accused. Let's see. We have dialogue back and forth without tags, which can be okay, I would think, sparingly. But we don't want to go a long time like that, and you did pretty good bringing it back here with Peter. I happen to be able to follow it because you made it clear to me, and for the purposes of fan fiction, I think it's totally acceptable. Well, yeah, Tony, so you know that's Peter because there's only the two of them, so good job. House my booty. Pepper would have called me if she had gone home, period. Tony pointed an accusing finger at him. Or Tony accused. I'm just going for less words in intense situations. How on earth would Pepper know that she went home? She lives 4 blocks down from here. Peter asked, eyebrows furrowing. Let's think. I'm not entirely sure. I kind of feel like that should be a lowercase. How on earth would Pepper know that she went home? She lives 4 blocks down from here, period. I would not do the dots. I'd just do the period. Peter asked, eyebrows furrowing. We're going to go with that. Who on earth are you yapping about? Tony asked. Who on earth are you yapping about? Blank, Dad, now I have a headache. Okay, so we're entering a new character here. I can see because we've got Morgan, Peter, Morgan. I know she's here. Morgan, Peter, Morgan. I know she's here. Okay, so is Tony Peter's dad in this situation? If in this verse, Tony is Peter's dad, I can roll with that. I would make this capital though, because he's calling him his dad. And the way I read it, because it was lowercase, it kind of threw me for a loop because I was like, wait, I didn't know Tony as Peter's dad. So if he had capitalized it, I would have known immediately that he was referring to Tony as his dad, and I would not have stumbled over that. I'm seeing more dialogue without tags. If you're getting stuck with what to do with your characters while you have dialogue, you can, especially this is an intense situation, so you don't want to give too much internal dialogue in this scenario. You're doing well there. I would give them actions like, what are some things that people do when they're stressed? You fidget with something, you shift your weight, where are you looking? What do you, if it's, I'm not even sure. We'll stay with this for a second. Try to think of what a person does. So imagine the two people talking and think about what do they do. Think of a scene in your head of a situation in real life where a person was having a similar type of back and forth with a parent. What kind of things are the expressions on that person's face? What are they doing? Like, you might pop your knuckles, you might wring your hands, you might cross your arms, you might put a hand to your face if you're exasperated, you might rub your face or put your face in your hands. You might if it's a woman, they might twist their hair. There are all kinds of actions and things that we do. And if you speak with your hands, you might wave them around, which I'm actually doing and you all can't see because this is all audio. But at the same point, it goes to when you're looking for what to do with your characters and you don't want to constantly say he said, she said, he said, she said, and you're doing well at not doing that, then I would give them an action. They could even pick up something off of a table and just start like spinning it around or fooling with it. And you might even look for like a list on Pinterest of actions for your characters. You could just go on Pinterest and search, and you'll find a little pop-up list of some sort that'll give you a whole bunch of ideas of things that your characters can be doing while they're talking. And that'll help. So let's keep going. Morgan, Peter, Morgan, I know she's here. Okay, I would do a period, and an exclamation. Morgan isn't here. Don't you think you'd notice her? Peter asked, spreading his hands to indicate the small studio they were standing in. I actually like this. This is a good one. It gives the space. This is the appropriate use of an adjective in the situation. This is great. I totally can just envision Peter standing there demonstrating the size of the room they're standing in. The single-space room was empty, aside from the two of them and Peter's furniture. No hiding spots were available, not even a closet. Peter had a dresser. Even the tiny bathroom's door was open, as Peter had just finished mopping after his shower and had left it like this for the tiles to dry faster. Who was here then? Tony asked suspiciously. Bringing a hand to pinch the bridge of his nose, Peter sighed in tired frustration. Okay, I would omit tired. It's redundant. You've got frustration. It stands just fine on its own. And I do like the visual of him pinching the bridge of his nose. This is nice. You're exhausting, he commented as he moved to the small kitchen counter, reaching for 2 mugs and the half-filled coffee pot. I would omit the word small. We don't want to use it a whole bunch in one place. I would just omit that adjective. I know that his house is small now because we know he's in a studio. So, bringing a hand to pinch the bridge of his nose, Peter sighed in frustration. You're exhausting, he commented as he moved to the kitchen counter, reaching for 2 mugs and the half-filled coffee pot. You're avoiding to answer, Tony commented, following right behind Peter in the corner of the studio that served as a small kitchen. Again, we've got small again. I would just say, you might even do this. If you want to imply that it's a small kitchen, you could say kitchenette. That does both jobs for you. I'd say a corner of the studio that served as the kitchenette. I would say the kitchenette. And then you can omit all that in the kitchenette. Tony commented, following right behind Peter into the kitchenette. Or Tony commented following, and I would omit this part and just say Peter into the kitchenette. Let's read it again. You're avoiding to answer. I don't know that we need the word to here. You're avoiding the question. That's what I would say. You're avoiding the question, Tony commented, following Peter into the kitchenette. A friend? All right. A friend who stayed over last night, Peter said with a huff as he filled the 2 mugs and returned the coffee pot to the coffee machine. Let's see. A friend, all right. A friend who stayed over last night, Peter said with a huff. Period. He filled 2 mugs and returned the coffee pot. Returned the carafe to the coffee pot or the coffee machine, coffee maker. There you go, coffee maker. Grabbing the mugs, he offered one to Tony. After taking a sip from his own cup, he walked towards his small couch, plopping down. I would omit on it. You don't need it. When Tony joined him, Peter asked, "What's going on? Why are you particularly grumpy today?" I would say this, because this is a fun sentence, actually. Why are you extra grumpy today? There you go. Are you seriously going to keep acting like you don't know anything? Tony asked, annoyed. Okay. I don't know anything. Now, do you want to tell me what on earth is going on and why you're here looking for Morgan? Or will you keep nagging at me about my door and my lady friends? Peter asked impatiently. Okay, we've got 2 asked within 2 dialogue sentences. I would probably mix it up and give them an action instead of using asked that closely together. So I would think of something they could be doing and have them moving. You're doing really good up here when you have them moving around. It's really good. You're really showing your work there and painting a scene. And so that's my suggestion here, and to avoid having asked within 2 sentences of each other. You should move into one of our many apartments. Seriously, what's the point of me owning all these swanky places if you insist on renting miserable holes like this? You already have more than one decent place with decent size, a decent door, and a decent security in your name. Why you insist on living like this is beyond me, Tony concluded his tirade by glancing around Peter's place with a judgy look on his face. I actually really like that. I'm going to leave that whole thing alone. It works. I even love the way you used, with intent, clear intent, repetitive word here of decent. It reads really well because that is how someone would speak. Let's see. You have the attention span of a dinoflagellate. I love this. Gotta love Peter. You have the attention span of a dinoflagellate, Peter stated. Morgan, pace with me. What's going on? Should I worry? All right. So I'm hoping I'm reading that sentence right with all these exclamation points. My suggestion is just to be stingier with them. Yes, you should worry, because when I get my hands on her... Dad, come on, what happened? Tony sighed in frustration. He looked at Peter tensely as he ground out his next words. She went for a joyride. Peter remained looking at him silently for a few seconds. That's it? That's like nothing. With a friend of hers, Tony continued. Okay. Peter's facial expression still conveyed underwhelmed confusion and surprise. I'm going to pause. I love this, and I want to read this closing really bad, but I'm going to stop myself because the story here is so cute that it deserves all the little adjustments that are going to make it even better. All right. I'm following along really well, despite that we have we know who's talking. Okay. Tony sighed in frustration. It's okay. We're going to go. He looked at Peter tensely as he ground out his next words. We're going to leave that too. Okay. Peter remained looking at him silently for a few seconds. I want to say Peter stared at him. Seconds passing. Long seconds passing. Yeah. Almost like it's just sometimes when we have a whole bunch of words, we could say it with less words and it'll read better. or tighter, I guess. Peter stared at him, long seconds passing. That's it? That's like nothing. But there's also nothing, this works too, okay? That's personal opinion. That is only a suggestion. With a friend of hers, Tony continued. I like this. Okay. All right, here we go. Peter's facial expression still conveyed underwhelmed confusion and surprise. This is called telling rather than showing. What does a person's facial expression look like when they're underwhelmed, confused, and surprised? What do their eyes look like? We can keep it very short and sweet. I mean, honestly, if you leave this exactly like this, at this point down here, you could say Peter stared at him, Peter remained looking at him silently for a few seconds. Yeah, you know what? Leave that. Leave it. I can see it happening. Okay, so Peter's just staring. Basically, Peter's staring at him. Ooh, he's staring at him in disbelief, but we don't want to say that because everybody says that. So we want to be a little bit different. So yeah. Or Peter just looked at him. You could also say that too if you wanted to keep it short. Peter just looked at him. Leaving Peter just I can just see his face. Okay. Peter's facial expression still conveyed underwhelmed confusion and surprise. You can think about this. You could either leave it, but it is telling, and you could choose he could have a slack-jawed expression, something that is just a little more showing. There's a really great book that I used when I first started describing people's facial expressions and their eyes and their emotions. And I'll share a link to those in the comments section after I upload the video. But I use them as a reference. I still use them sometimes. But they really helped me to use other descriptors. And I personally have an issue where I slip into telling. And sometimes it's really hard for me to see that I did that. And that's one benefit to having someone else look at your work, is to be like, this is just a little bit telling. Very small. I'm still loving this. We're going to keep going. I don't want to rant. In 2 of my suits, Tony tacked on as he took a sip from his mug. See, I love this. This is very good. Oh, in 2 of my space suits. Oh. And they went for a ride over the effing Carmen line. Dang, Peter concluded quietly with a grimace. Let's see. I would not use quietly and with a grimace. I would use one word here or pick one or the other. Oh, how about this? Peter grimaced. Or Peter cringed. Dang, Peter cringed. You got that right. How on earth did they manage to take the suits? Didn't you baby-proof them or whatever? I remember attempting to take one and Friday giving you my butt on a silver plate. She hacked her way into them, Tony said annoyedly, even though he didn't manage to entirely stop some pride from tingling his tone. Okay. I would say maybe that he grumbled, or she hacked her way into him, Tony sighed, even though he didn't manage to entirely stop some pride from tingling his tone. Or Tony said matter-of-factly. I kind of like that. It's like, because it kind of implies some of this too. But I would play with this a little bit. What's bothering me about it is the word annoyedly. You could even say that he said annoyed and drop the ly and put a comma here and say Tony said, comma, annoyed, period. Yeah, that might work. She hacked her way into them, Tony said, annoyed, even though he didn't manage to entirely stop some pride from tingling his tone. Do you want tingling or did you want tinging? Just asking. Peter's eyes enlarged at that. She managed to override your safety protocols and hack Friday? Dang, Morgan, way to go, kid. If you dare to sound impressed whenever she talks to you about this, I'm going to bust your butt too. You hear me? Tony wagged a pointer finger dangerously close to Peter's nose. Past tense. I won't, but you got to admit, the kid's going to go far, Peter said with a proud smile. I love this. I love this whole exchange. It's so cute. Not if she breaks her darn neck doing dumb things like this, she won't. Oh, come on. You can't seriously tell me you didn't get where she's coming from, Peter countered as he took another sip from his mug. Are you seriously trying to defend her right now? Tony asked disbelievingly. Let's see. Tony. Could think about that. Tony asked in disbelief. I would almost say in disbelief. Yeah. I'm just not a big... Of course, I'm trained to look for these words and to try to replace them or omit them. So it could just be that that's my reader brain because that's what I'm trained to do. I'm not really sure here. It could be perfectly fine. Are you seriously trying to defend her right now? Tony asked in disbelief. She has you wrapped around her little finger like ivy on a fence. Period. We have no punctuation there. Peter rolled his eyes at that. Like you're any better. You brought her a darn pony the minute she asked for it, and then had an entire lab with vets and biologists experiment on the poor thing to find a way to make it a unicorn pony when she couldn't stop crying for one. Hey, the experimentation was 100% humane. That pony is still alive, healthy, and happy. Tony defended his actions shamelessly. I'm going to leave this. Tony doesn't have any shame. Lots of exclamation points throughout all of this. I would just go back and look for that. You don't need me to go on about it anymore. And looks like a darn rhinoceros. It's not like it knows that, Tony countered. Peter couldn't help but snort at the absurd dialogue they were exchanging and the even more absurd memory of Mr. Sparkle's adventure. Capital on Mr. You have a word echo in the sentence, but I like the way you're using it, so I'm going to leave it. Bringing the discussion back to focus, he continued. My point is, she's growing up with all this amazing tech around her. These shiny, incredible gadgets that do all sorts of awesome things. You can't expect her not to be tempted to play with them. I would leave this one, but I would just put a period here and omit the 3 dots there. I expect her to be tempted, Peter. I also expect her to play by the rules. With mine or Pepper's permission and under supervision, Tony countered. Tony has countered before. You want to be careful not to use repetition on the dialogues. If you can avoid it, give him something else to say or do here. Dad, come on, Peter sighed with a tired expression. Okay. I would probably say... I'd probably give Peter an action here, and either that or basically he's exasperated. He's exhausted. And you could just say that Peter said, comma, exhausted or exasperated. One of the things we do when we're kind of done, okay, which sounds like Peter's kind of done with this. It's wearing him out. And we kind of like throw our hands up, you know, we're like, I'm done. You could give him an action that says that too. It might help. She's a teen. She's bound to break the rules. It's normal. It's normal to break curfew every now and then, Peter. Not to steal bloody spaceships, Tony remarked dryly. I think dryly is spelled D-R-Y-L-Y. Spacesuits. Don't inflate things, Peter corrected him. Tony shook his head, and now it was his turn to pinch the bridge of his nose. I love this. Peter watched him carefully. All I'm saying is, I get how tempting having everything just out of reach is, and we both know how important it is to look cool at her age. Can you imagine being 16 and able to sneak a ride in your superhero dad's state-of-the-art flying to the gosh darn spacesuit? Tony stared back at Peter silently. I would just say this. When you're staring, we're not typically speaking. I would just say Tony stared at Peter. Taking advantage of the lack of retort, Peter continued. I can tell you, if you had developed those things back when I was her age, I'd definitely try to take a ride with Ned. And don't even try to pretend you wouldn't try the same crap if you had access to something like that when you were 16. Tony now sighed. Peter read the man's movements and could practically see the gears turning in his head. Okay, Tony didn't really move. He sighed, so I would say expression here. Tony now sighed. Peter read the man's expression and could practically see the gears turning in his head. I'm not saying she wasn't out of line, but she wasn't, completely overboard, Peter added carefully. Okay, so Peter used carefully up here. It's here and it's up here. I would just omit carefully and just say Peter added. He didn't want to be too blunt about any of this. This needed careful maneuvering. So we've got careful again. So if you omit it here, I think it serves here really well, and I'd leave it there. You think I shouldn't ground her? Is that what you're telling me? Because you know better than I do. Had you pulled a stunt like this at her age? Oh, I know, Peter easily accepted. But I was constantly in trouble in pulling stunts, not to mention far less cute than Morgan is. At the scoff that involuntarily left his father's lips, he continued, Seriously now, she's a good kid. She rarely screws up. I don't say turn blind eyes. Just fix your system. Make sure she won't override it again. And take away her car. She loves that thing more than Mr. Sparkles. Cell phone privileges. Come on. That's the things teenagers live for these days. All right, capital M on Mr. Sparkles. Tony sighed and shook his head as he deposited the empty by now mug on the coffee table. Pause. I would link this right here with little hyphens. Empty hyphen by, you're doing empty by now and you're linking them together. So I would use hyphens between empty and by and now. Tony sighed and shook his head as he deposited the empty by now mug on the coffee table. Or you could just say, Tony sighed and shook his head as he deposited the empty mug on the coffee table. I can't believe I'm taking parenting advice by my own son, he mumbled. This would be from my own son. Why the heck not, Peter countered. You parented me and I didn't turn out that bad, Peter said, letting some tenderness slip into his tone. Small smirk forming. Tony shook his head. I'd put a comma right here, okay? Small smirk forming. Tony shook his head. You turned out incredible. And don't kid yourself. I'm still parenting you. I'd put a period there. Yeah, you could tell that to yourself, old man. I would say you keep telling yourself that, old man. That's probably how I would say it. I want to make a note here to anyone watching this video. This author did tell me that English is not their first language. You really can't tell, but I'm pausing to rephrase some things, specifically keeping in mind that note from the author to me. Rising to his feet, Tony let out another sigh. I'd better get going. Yeah, get back home. I'm sure Morgan will come back sooner than you think. I guess. We're not done discussing this living arrangement of yours, by the way, Tony said as he walked toward the door. And stop leaving your keys in the lock. Peter followed him and opened the door for him, leaning on it as he waited for the man to leave. Stop using your key without permission or emergency, and I might consider it, Peter quipped. Brat, insufferable old man. We'll see you on Sunday for lunch. Yes, you will. Now get. I have work to get to. Tony hugged his adoptive son close and patted his back twice. Thanks, kid. In this case, you'll capitalize the K because he's calling him his kid. We capitalize in formals if it's a formal situation. Let's see. You're welcome, Dad. And this would be capitalized as well, Peter said with a smile as they broke the embrace. Closing the door behind the departing figure, Peter waited for the elevator to sound. When it did, he let out a sigh of relief and walked to the large window on the wall next to his bed. He opened the heavy gray curtains and held them to the side as his sister stood from her spot on the fire escape stairs and climbed back inside. Turning to look at Peter, she wore her best stark glare, complete with furrowed eyebrows and a straight-line crease between them. Take away her car? Take away her phone? What are you thinking? I thought you were supposed to get me out of trouble, Morgan said in an accusatory tone, her lips forming a perfect displeased pout. Okay. We're going to pause right here. I did a little muffling on this sentence I've been fudging it over the curse words. So forgive me for that. I thought you were supposed to get me out of trouble, Morgan said. Oh, I would say accusing. So generally when I use the word, I now do this. If you look back at any of my old writings, you're going to catch me doing everything that I'm pointing out to you. And I've said again and again, I flip-flop on whether or not I'll revise my work because I can refer back to it and show you guys that I've done all of these things. But now when I'm writing, I look for words like tone and voice. And when I use those words, I ask myself, can I just use another word to describe it without using that word? Sometimes you're going to still need to use those words and they're available to you, obviously. But sometimes we don't need them and we can say it a different way and get more meaning or the same meaning in a cleaner writing technique. So Morgan said, comma, accusing. Or Morgan accused. You could do that. Take away her car, take away her phone. What were you thinking? I thought you were supposed to get me out of trouble, Morgan accused, her lips forming a perfect displeased pout. I do like this a lot right here. I like that. When you give them actions, you are doing a really good job of it. It's very nice. I can very clearly see it, and it's very cute. Crossing his arms across his, let's see. Okay, so here we go. Crossing his arms across his chest. I would say over, or just say crossing his arms. Yep, there we go. Crossing his arms, omit this, comma. Peter fixed her with the best warning look he could muster when dealing with that particular pouting face. I wasn't supposed to do anything. You came here and begged for my help to get you out of a grounding. A well-earned one, may I add. And I did. So this is where you put on your sweetest smile, hug me, and offer me your deepest gratitude, little sis. I love this so much. I love it. The story is so cute. Capital L, capital S, because he's addressing her, and that is what he is calling her. Let's see. Also, since Peter's talking, and right here you're setting it up beautifully, I personally would scoot this dialogue right up to the end of this sentence right here, and I'd start my dialogue right there. So basically you're just deleting this space right here. His words registering, Morgan let her hands fall to her sides. She looked up at Peter through her dark eyelashes and offered a lopsided apologetic smirk. Okay, I can see this being very cute. His words registering, Morgan let her hands fall to her sides. She looked up at Peter through, I might take the her out and just say through dark eyelashes, comma, offering a lopsided apologetic smirk. Or you can leave it and. That's subjective. I think that's a personal opinion. You could even ignore me on that whole entire thing. Sorry, Pete. You're right. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. Again, you've done beautifully. I know that we are with Morgan. This is her dialogue. I would scooch it right up to the end of this sentence. Sorry, Pete. You're right. Thank you so much. I totally owe you one. No, to hell with one. I owe you 3,000, she answered in her sweetest voice, and she took the 2 steps between them, hugging him tightly. I'm going to pause. I have caught myself repeatedly saying 2 steps here, 2 steps there, 3 steps here, 3 steps there. You have not used it repetitively, so you're fine. I now have a personal thing where I'm trying to not do that anymore. I might say short distance. I've very, very, very sparingly should use 2 steps, but there was a time period where I fell into a pattern and I started using it a lot. That's one of the things that I personally keep an eye out for in my own writing to make sure I'm not being repetitive. You have not done that here. That's a personal note, a personal observation. Sorry, Pete, you're right. Thank you so much. I totally owe you one. No, to heck with one. I owe you 3,000, she answered in her sweetest voice. Period. She took, let's see. She closed the gap between them, hugging him tightly. I like that. I think I like that a little bit better. She closed the gap between them. She closed the gap, or closed the space between them, hugging him tightly. I like that. Those are my suggestions there. A warm smile spread on Peter's face with the way she altered the signature phrase of her toddler years. Peter shook his head, amused, and mumbled, "You're something else, kid." Okay, I did kind of fudge that a little bit. Let's see. Peter shook his head, comma, amused. I would drop the ly there. And I kind of don't think you need this at all. The "and" mumbled. I don't think you need a dialogue tag because you know that you're with Peter. So I think you could just omit "and" mumbled and just say, "You're something else, kid." And I don't know if he's exclaiming it because you implied that he was mumbling, even though I just advised you to remove that. It seems like it's an affectionate thing that he's just saying to her. So I don't know that he's shouting it. I would probably just put a period there. A warm smile spread on Peter's face with the way she altered the signature phrase of her toddler years. Peter shook his head, amused. "Here's something else, kid." See if you like that. Running a hand through the soft brown hair, he finally broke the hug and headed to the couch. This would be her, either her or his. I mean, could be her or his. I'm not actually sure. So pick one or the other. If it's his hair, then he ran a hand through his hair. If it's her, then he ran a hand through her hair. Running a hand through his soft brown hair, he finally broke the hug and reached and headed to the couch. "Come sit down. I'll call you a cab. You'd better get home before Pepper talks Tony back to put you under complete lockdown." Let's see. You'd better get home before Pepper talks Tony back into putting you under complete lockdown. How's that? Back into putting you under complete lockdown. Or you'd better get back before Pepper talks Tony into putting you under complete lockdown. I would go with that last one. Morgan plopped herself next to him on the couch and waited patiently for her brother to make the call. When he hung up, her eyes drifted to the ceiling. "Hey, Pete." "Yeah." "Would you consider smuggling me a smartphone on Sunday?" The throw pillow that unceremoniously landed on her face was the only answer she got. Nice. Okay, Morgan plopped herself down next to him. That's what I'd probably say. Yeah. Morgan plopped herself down beside him or down next to him and waited patiently for her brother to make the call. I might even say this. Morgan plopped herself down beside him, waiting patiently for her brother to make the call, or waiting for her brother to make the call. When he hung up, her eyes drifted to the ceiling. "Hey, Pete," and I might put this little dialogue tag right up there, but because you're at the end, I might also leave it here because it does end very nicely. This is a really cute little story, and I do love it. It's a great, nice little one shot. I like the scene. I do like I like Tony being his adoptive dad. This is really good. Everyone's in character. I've got a great portrayal of Morgan. The super cute. I really enjoy this story, and I'm super excited to share it with everyone. Thank you, MarionAveoneLuther, for sharing this with us. And everyone, go check out this cute one shot and other works by Marion. And we'll see you next time.